Captain English, can you have us read?
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We have just a brief update for you on the investigation today, and then we have an announcement that we're going to be sharing about how we're supporting our community. Today, we will have time for Q&A at the end, so if you could just save your questions, we'll do it similarly to how we've been doing it. If you could just do one question at a time so everyone gets an opportunity, and then we'll come back around. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Harding for an update on the investigation.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. We have a short update today regarding the investigation into the shooting which occurred on June 2nd. I want to start by thanking the community. We've received a large number of tips, and we continue to follow up on each and every tip that we receive. We've been working through a lot of interviews and still following up on each additional lead. During that interview process, we have found that we now have a 28th victim involved in the shooting. 36-year-old female. She was grazed 3 times in the arm. She initially went to the hospital, but her injuries were not severe enough to be seen right away and was referred somewhere else, and she did not seek additional medical treatment. So at that point, when we were doing witness interviews, we identified her, and we'll have a conversation with her. Don't have a lot more to share today. We do anticipating having a more substantial update in the next few days as the investigation continues to unfold. And I'll be willing to take some questions at the end as well. But at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Malik, so he can now share some updates as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. So today we are announcing the creation of a gun violence response fund, which will help support the victims of the June 2nd shooting and hopefully more broadly going forward. So as we have responded to this tragedy very early on, this was an idea that came up certainly in other situations in which we've had shootings, mass shootings with large numbers of victims. This is something that occurred in Dayton and in other communities. It's something we wanted to look into and think about what function and form would make sense for Akron. And so we're partnering with the Akron Community Foundation, with victim assistance, and with a number of other community entities, including United Way of Summit Medina, in order to make this happen. So our friends with victim assistance and with Akron Community Foundation will delve more into the structure of the fund and how it will work. But I want to take a second and talk about gun violence. Gun violence is a huge issue in our community and in many cities across the country. It's something that has been a high priority for me and for our new administration and will continue to be. This fund is not about funding violence prevention or intervention. It's not about city government initiatives. This is about providing support to victims. And I think throughout this process, we are all learning more about the victim assistance infrastructure and learning about how we can better support it. So we as a city will continue to fund some of our new initiatives like Credible Messengers, the Youth Success Summit work, which will provide more opportunities for young people to hopefully prevent them going down a road that might lead to violence. But this specific fund is to something for our community to rally around to help the victims of this tragedy we are dealing with. So at this time, I would like to introduce John Garofalo from the Akron Community Foundation, Vice President with the Akron Community Foundation, to share more about the Gun Violence Response Fund.
Thank you, Mayor Malik. And thank you to you and Chief Harding for the ongoing investigation as our community continues to heal from the senseless tragedy. Good afternoon to you all. For close to 70 years, Akron Community Foundation has worked closely with nonprofit partners here in our community who provide valuable programs and services to those who need it and those who need a hand up in our community. One of those programs is Victim Assistance Program. Over the past 25 years, ACF has invested over $1 million to support the work of Victim Assistance Program here in our community and helping them solve their issues of helping victims of crime in our community. In partnership with the City of Akron, with Victim Assistance Program, and the United Way of Summit and Medina, Akron Community Foundation's Board of Directors just last Friday voted to create the Gun Violence Response Fund, and we immediately made a $25,000 investment as the first dollars into the fund. Our friends and colleagues at the United Way of Summit and Medina have also matched that $25,000 contribution to get the fund up and running. Being a part of the philanthropic sector in Greater Akron, we know we live in a very giving and a very generous community. We saw that firsthand during the events of 9/11, when in 1 month, this community was able to raise $1.4 million to support the New York City police and fire departments. They used those monies to buy a new ladder truck, 2 ambulances, and 3 patrol cars. It is our hope that this community will once again be just as generous to this newly created Gun Violence Response Fund so that we could help Victim Assistance Program meet the needs of those victims impacted by the events of last weekend's shooting in East Akron. To donate, you can visit the Akron Community Foundation website at www.akroncf.org/Gun Violence Response Fund, or you can call our main office at 330-376-8522 to make a contribution. ACF can accept gifts of cash, stocks, securities, or a donor can give through their donor advice fund. Please know that every dollar helps, whether you give $5 or $5,000. Every bit of it will go to Victim Assistance Program so that they can continue to carry out their mission of assisting those who have been impacted by gun violence now and into the future. We at ACF will work in collaboration with leaders at Victim Assistance to account for funds spent, and will make disbursements from the fund on an as-needed basis. Thank you again, Mayor Malik, for your partnership in creating this fund that will have a lasting impact in our community, again, now and forever. At this time, I'd like to call up my friend, Leanne Graham, President and CEO of Victim Assistance Program, who will talk about the work her agency has done in the past 8 days. Leanne.
Thank you, John, and the Akron Community Foundation for your ability to kick off what I hope to be a long-lasting resource for victims in our community. For the last 52 years, Victim Assistance has been witness to the physical, emotional, psychological, and financial impact so many victims have had throughout Summit County. They often face these in the aftermath of one's victimization. To the 28 victims of last weekend's shooting, we see you, we hear you, we want to be here for you. We know you are suffering, and we want to collectively help. The Gun Violence Response Fund will allow our nonprofit Victim Assistance Program to assist more victims overcome the financial strain caused by victimizations. Trauma is messy, and everyone's experience and situation is different. Because of that, I'm unable to provide specific examples of the financial barriers everyone encounters, because they are vast and they are different. But I'm grateful for the advisory chairs, Tracy, Ron, and Pastor Myrix, who will assist Victim Assistance Program to develop an equitable and frugal way of how we can assist victim assistance and ensure that these donations of funds make the largest impact possible. The purpose of these funds complement our mission, which is to empower our community to restore lives impacted by crisis, violence, and tragedy. The purpose of our nonprofit is to provide 24-hour crisis intervention, advocacy, and education to victims of crime and trauma, as well as the professional community who serves this population. We don't work for the police, we don't work for the government. we work for victims. Our close relationships, though, with the justice system allows us to advocate for victims in and outside of the system. This means all victims are eligible for our services, even those who have never disclosed their victimization to the police. We annually support approximately 5,000 individuals, which are residents and employees of Summit County, who have experienced a crisis, trauma, or tragedy. Our nonprofit defines victim as anyone impacted by a criminal-related victimization or a tragedy. This could be suicide, traffic fatality. Victims seeking support are asked to call our hotline 24 hours a day at 330-376-0040 or walk into one of our 6 office locations located throughout the county listed on our website. When you arrive or when we pick up that phone, we are ready to listen, to empower, to educate, inform, and refer. Thanks to this specific fund, we are now planning to address more victims' financial strain as we've ever done before. These funds will be available 1 week from today, Monday, June 17th at 1 p.m. For those looking to support victim assistance outside of this fund, we ask you call our business line instead to not tie up our hotline. Our business line is 330-376-7022, extension 208. I want to thank those in the community who have supported Dr. Bob Denton's vision 52 years ago, as well as those supporting our organization for the last years, days, and months to come. On behalf of the victims we serve, Mayor Malik, thank you. To our future donors, thank you. Akron Community Foundation, thank you. And our city government as well. I'd like to invite Ward 5 Council Representative Johnny Hanna to say a few words.
Good afternoon. My name is Johnny Hanna. I'm Ward 5 Councilman. Ward 5 has experienced something that we only imagined in other communities and cities. We have had a mass shooting in Ward 5. The residents are traumatized and do not feel safe in our neighborhoods. We must be proactive and develop plans and strategies to combat violence in our city. Why do we wait until tragedy happens before we start to address the needs in our community? These funds will help the victims to begin the healing process and not have to worry about mounting medical bills. We're asking those businesses and institutions to invest not only their monetary resources, but programs that will help decrease the gun violence and that has plagued our neighborhoods. We must start to have open dialogue with our youth, especially those that feel like there's no hope. I would like to invite the co-chair of this fund to the podium, Tracy Morgan. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Councilman Hanna. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Tracy Carter, and I was raised in East Akron, and I've dedicated my life to supporting initiatives that help the health and economic well-being of individuals and families. I'm pleased to serve as a co-chair of a committee to help Mayor Malik execute a special fund to assist those who were affected by the June 2nd mass shooting incident. Ron Pato, Regional President of Huntington Bank, and Pastor Charles Myrick's, leader of the Arlington Church of God, will also serve as co-chairs. We want to thank the many Akron residents, businesses, and community leaders who have been gathering and collaborating this past week. those who have been connecting with victims and the community at large. Last week, Pastor Myrick's hosted a prayer vigil. City of Akron Councilman Johnny Hanna has been reaching out to the community. And Ron and I personally would like to thank former Akron City Council woman Tara Samples, Akron City Councilman at large Eric Garrett, and Ray Green, Executive Director of Freedom Block, for attending a meeting we were at last week convened by Kemp Boyd, Executive Director of Love Akron. And it was at that meeting we had a chance to hear and learn more about what the individuals and families were facing. All of these efforts have helped mobilize individuals, foundations, corporations, and now the City of Akron to initiate a fund that will help victims with their recovery and their basic life needs. A special account, as the mayor and Mr. Hanna and others are saying, a special account will be established at the Akron Community Foundation to receive funds from the community to help the mass shooting victims and their families. Mayor Malik has arranged for us to speak with Michael Parks, the president of the Dayton Foundation, later today. Mr. Parks was very instrumental in executing a fund to help the individuals and families who were affected by the August 4th, 2019 Oregon District tragedy. After we meet with the foundation representative, the co-chairs, we will join the mayor, hopefully in future meetings with the victims, so that we may continue to learn more from them about their current and projected needs. We will also begin to think through our committee structure, the giving priorities of the fund, a fundraising plan, and the eligibility criteria for individuals to receive assistance. So we know individuals need help now. Leanne covered how critical their needs are at this moment in time to get them through this traumatic incident and to move forward with their lives. We anticipate giving the community more information in the days ahead about the fund and how they may contribute more intently with the fund. And I want to thank you all in advance for giving us time to think this through so that, as Leanne mentioned, we could be very, equitable and frugal with the funds that are coming in to have the greatest impact on the community. And so with that, I will now yield the floor back to our mayor.
Thank you, Tracy. I want to thank everyone who was involved in the discussions over the past week. I want to particularly thank Kent Boyd from Love Akron, who it seems like is always in the background trying to assist, and we appreciate you, sir. Today, we will introduce legislation to Akron City Council to authorize $150,000 to be allocated to this fund. I want to thank Councilman Hanna for co-sponsoring that legislation, and I appreciate the efforts of all of our council members in responding to this tragedy. I particularly want to thank the three co-chairs of the advisory committee, Pastor Myrick, Mr. Pato, and Ms. Carter. As the advisory committee continues to be built out, they will help support Leanne, and I think will be an invaluable resource in assisting with the development of this fund. One thing that I thought of over the past week is that in tragedies, you see the best and worst of humanity, right? And a shooting in which 28 people are shot is the worst of humanity. EMS and fire and police running into a situation in which it hasn't all been cleared is heroic work. The work of quietly attending to victims' needs is also heroic work, and we want to thank you. So with that, I think that's all we have. We're happy to take any of your questions.
Can you elaborate on how the funds will be distributed among so many potential victims?
I don't think that I can much beyond what was shared. I think part of what we wanted to do is go ahead and put this together and help capitalize the fund and help set in place a structure. But, we trust victim assistance has a process by which it does needs assessments and can help determine the needs, and I think has already begun that work with regard to this shooting. But I think it was clear to all of us that victim assistance is not set up to necessarily respond to a situation of this magnitude. And so this fund is a starting point to assist those victims. So to Tracy's point, I think the advisory committee will help provide that structure, but we can't provide all of the details or all of those guardrails until we're able to determine them. I do want to thank former Dayton Mayor Nan Whaley, who has been really kind and responsive in providing feedback to me and then connecting us to resources, including to the Dayton Community Foundation, which unfortunately had this experience dealing with the Oregon shooting. So we look forward to their help. Also want to thank folks at the Cleveland Foundation who have been helpful, and especially Akron Community Foundation. So that's what we have today. Anna?
I know you said you can't go into some specific details, but what have you been hearing from the families? Like, what are some examples of things that they really need, like that this money will help with at this point?
Sure. I mean, again, I don't want to speculate too much. Obviously, we have one deceased person, and obviously that will involve funeral expenses and other things. Obviously, you have, more than 24 other people who, were hospitalized, who have injuries that they're going to be recovering from. And then obviously you have, folks who may not necessarily be able to work. And, there's two aspects to this. There's, the physical pain and physical injuries, and then there's also psychological injuries, right? So I think, again, as a layman, that's some of what I would, if I was to speculate, that's some of what I think we're seeing so far.
Have you been in touch with the Cook family? If so, how are they doing? And have they expressed any needs on what they can benefit from for this assistance program, from this program?
I have not been directly in touch. I have been starting to reach out to victims directly. I know Victim Assistance Program has been directly in touch with the victims, and I don't know that we can share anything specific as to the families, but obviously, the Cook family is going through the worst tragedy because they suffered a loss. And so we want to support them during this time. I think, that's another thing we want to underscore is that this fund will start by supporting the 28 victims of this shooting. And then to the extent we are able to support beyond that, we will do so, but it will start by focusing on the June 2nd shooting. There's no update at this time, and refer you to the hospitals.
Chief, you mentioned that you all are following leads. Have any of them led to a potential suspect or suspects in this case?
We are following up on the leads. I don't have a specific suspect or any of that information that I'm willing to share right now.
To you again, Chief,
Sure.
sorry. The 36-year-old woman that was the 28th victim, how did you later find out that there was another victim?
So in the course of our interviews, we attempt to identify the people that were there to see if we can get any information. She was initially she was just a witness. During that witness interview, we learned that she was actually a victim. So I anticipate that could happen again as we continue to move forward in that regard.
I was wondering, the fatal shooting over the weekend, is there any connection between that and the mass shooting?
At this point, we have no connection between the two, none at all.
Is it 29 now, including the one deceased individual, or 28? Oh, we still have a
I believe there were 28. I go. Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you everyone for being here.